Hello, YouTube. My name is Alan, and it's that time once again. Let's talk metal. Tonight, we're going to be doing a band deep dive. Well, it's an act whose catalog isn't really long enough for like an episode of Heavy Metallurgy or anything like that. But still, it's a band with a fantastic catalog. And 15, 20 years ago, this band was very much the toast of the town in a lot of heavy metal circles. But I feel like in recent years, they've kind of faded out of view a bit. They're still technically active and playing live. There's been rumors that they might do some new material in the near future, but it's been a solid 7 years or so since an album came out, so not really clear whether another one will or not. Regardless of whether that occurs or not, they have definitely made their mark, left a great impression on a lot of heavy metal fans. And for this episode, we're going to take a look at their catalog. The band I am speaking of is Pagan Altar. Talk a little bit about their history. I'll play a few clips from some of their releases. But for those who are not familiar with them, Pagan Altar came up in the new wave of British heavy metal years in London, and they played a style that was pretty similar to Black Sabbath. That's the obvious imprint that the band was kind of following, was like the first three Black Sabbath albums. Very doomy kind of 70s heavy metal sound, and they did it quite well. It's also kind of an unusual style for a band to be doing. In the new wave of British heavy metal, not a lot of bands went in that direction. If anything, the emphasis for a lot of the new wave of British heavy metal was to follow more of the late 1970s Judas Priest and Motorhead template. Make it faster, make it sharper, make it more metallic, and kind of leave those, slower, deeper rumblings, in the past. The idea was, again, to have a new wave of British metal, not just copycat what the old wave of British heavy metal had done the decade before. There were some exceptions to this. Witchfinder General was one of the more visible ones at the time. Pagan Altar, not so much so. The band was founded by a father-son duo, so a little bit of a different arrangement. Father Terry doing the vocals, son Alan Jones doing the guitars, and back in the day, they only managed to record like one demo tape. They reportedly played live around London quite a bit, had quite the elaborate stage show with all kinds of, occult, trappings and stuff, altars and, banners and all of this. But yeah, there were plans to do a single as early as 1980, but those never came to fruition. So the band got, about 7 songs put on a demo tape, got circulated a little bit, but by the mid 1980s, the band had called it quits. If that were the end of the story, there wouldn't be much to talk about here, though, would it? Well, the tape made the rounds in tape trading circles, including around the North American circuit. People have said the demo was very popular in the Bay Area, as a lot of the thrash bands were coming up. Can I substantiate that? No. Do I recall a specific instance of anybody from, Exodus or Testament or Metallica latching on and saying, "Oh yeah, we were all, rocking out to Pagan Altar demos"? No, I can't. And there are some things about this band that, are a little hard to verify. Regardless, people liked the demo enough that it did become kind of a thing among tape traders. And at some point, somebody ended up bootlegging it onto vinyl. It's not exactly clear when this was done. Some people have said that bootlegs started floating around in the 80s. I kind of suspect those were probably just the cassette bootlegs of the demo, though, people copying that as part of the tape trading circuit. It's probably more likely that the vinyl bootleg was done sometime in the mid 90s. But again, I can't exactly nail that down for certain. The original vinyl bootleg is this one. Has the band's logo. They always had this kind of, wizard-looking druid guy was kind of, their big emblem or avatar, as you like it. And the sleeves, pretty basic. I think the back just has, like title tracks and a few notes. It's a little bit stuck in the plastic there, but we'll get it out. So yeah, just, typical bootleg label, no information at all. a little bit of information on the back, including lineups from, two different eras of the band. They went through, some additional members, but, Alan and Terry were always kind of the core of the band. This was reportedly pressed up in a very small run of about 100 copies. A second pressing was done of about, reportedly, 500 copies, where the color scheme here is reversed. The main sleeve is black, the print is black, but, there's white box behind it and stuff. I do not have the black cover copy, so you can look up what that looks like online if you're so interested. Anyway, because these were relatively small press runs, they started selling for a lot of money on places like eBay. And that eventually came to the band's attention through one of their friends. They're like, hey, did you guys know that people are paying a crap ton of money for your guys' recording? Like, wait, what? So yeah, they looked into it and it was like, oh, maybe we should do something about that. So they, dusted things off and ended up putting out a legit version of the demo through their own label called Oracle Records, and it was called Volume 1. This had some information about the band. The recording was also known as, Judgment of the Dead, as says up here. So you'll see it with the, Volume 1 tag in some places, like on the spine, and then you'll see it called Judgment of the Dead in other places. The CD did quite well. It got people's attention. This came out in 1998. And this is where we'll play our first clip to get an idea of what Pagan Altar sounded like. And keep in mind, again, these were songs that were all recorded back, in like the latest 70s or early 1980s when the band was active on the scene during the new wave of British heavy metal. Going to play a clip from the song Judgment of the Dead. Again, I may skip around in a little bit of these. Some of these are relatively long songs, so I may try a couple of clips before I land on a spot that I feel is representative of their sound for you. But let's begin with a clip of Pagan Altar's great Judgment of the Dead. There is a snippet from Pagan Altar's Judgment of the Dead. So you can hear, yes, right away. They've got, kind of, the slow, dirge-like doominess of early Black Sabbath. Something else they have, though, that's an important part of their sound, and I think is sometimes overlooked, is, Alan Jones's guitar work can really rock out when he wants to. It's a little bit subtle. He's not doing, huge Eddie Van Halen upfront guitar heroics. But when you pay attention to it, he's very nimble on the guitar, and it makes the music, a little bit livelier. When they want to pick up the pace, he can certainly do so, and he can add these, quick little, runs and stuff that kind of keep the music a little more dynamic. It doesn't feel like a lot of, doom metal where it's all slow all the time. He can definitely dazzle a little bit on the guitar, and I love his playing. He's really, really good at it. So yeah, getting back to the Pagan Altar story, yeah, the band does very well. This makes a good impression on folks. It has distribution problems. I don't think they were quite expecting the response they got when they made it available. But yeah, it definitely got out there and got people's attention. Yeah, by the late 90s, people were paying a little more attention to doom, new wave of British heavy metal, had enjoyed a bit of a renaissance. People were interested in that stuff. But I think it's just, the sheer quality of the music is the main thing that got folks' attention. Not just that it was some obscure lost band or old recording dusted off, but that it was a really, really good one. Part of what helped with that was, Alan and Terry had basically sort of set up, their own home recording studio. So they were actually able to record a lot of stuff they worked on back in the day. This is very unusual for new wave of British heavy metal bands. Most of those bands did not have access to any kind of recording facility, so their trips to a studio to record anything for posterity were few and far between. But it turned out Pagan Altar had saved a lot of stuff back in the day because it was basically just, built into, a place they were living at. So yeah, this allowed them to go back and, actually offer up a good slab of what they had. Before I go on, something else I should definitely mention as part of their signature sound. Terry's vocals are very, very distinctive. He's got a very high, wailing, nasal quality to his voice. I can see where it could be a deal breaker for some folks. Yeah, folks that don't like those kind of vocals, this may not be the band for you. It reminds me a little bit, say, of like, Mark Shelton from Manila Road. If that's just not your jam, I get it. But personally, I don't mind the vocals at all. I think he's quite good, and the vocals give it a lot of character. Uh, this album has been reissued multiple times over the past 20 or so years. One reissue that I picked up on vinyl was this one. I think this came out in 2005. Here they did officially call it Judgment of the Dead. And this one is on Italy's Black Widow Records. Nice label. They do a nice job with a lot of the stuff they release. It's always a little hard to get in the United States. This one, I'm not going to actually pull it out, but it's on red vinyl. It comes with a, big booklet, kind of given a history of the band. It's written by one of the other former band members. I believe it's one of the former drummers, if I remember correctly. This was nice at the time because, as I said, it was always a little hard getting some of the details about this band in the early days. Again, late 90s, early aughts. Internet, was still kind of becoming a thing. The booklet, though, I gotta say, it's a little scattershot when you try to read through it. Uh, the fellow, I think, is, doing his best, but he kind of jumps around a bit in his narrative about the band. And it kind of goes off into like lots of little anecdotes about the band playing live here or, having, a hilarious incident in their touring van over there. And it doesn't quite come together as a really coherent narrative. If you were just wanting to know the nuts and bolts of the band's history, when they started, influences, where they were at this time, that time, it's not such a good read for that stuff. It's entertaining for, the more personal level anecdotes, but it doesn't really fill in any of the gaps if you're just trying to get the big picture of the band's history. Nevertheless, this is, nice pressing. Love the cover art that Black Widow put together for it. And there are other pressings of this as well. Some of the pressings are still kind of expensive. Some are kind of hard to get. The original bootlegs can be a pain to get because most sites won't let you sell them, of course. But anyway, Pagan Altar realized they had, kind of stumbled onto something. And so, like, what else do we still have in the vault? It turned out they had a lot. There were reportedly about 4 or 5 albums worth of material that they had worked on back in those early 80s and late 70s years. So, as we moved into the 2000s, they started putting out a few more things. In 2004, they released an EP called The Time Lord. This is the second pressing of it, which is on I Hate Records. First pressing looks almost exactly the same. I think the I Hate logo is just different on the back. This includes 5 songs. A couple of them were on the Volume 1 set, but these particular takes are interesting. Of particular note are 2 songs that were, I got to read my notes here. were originally written around 1978, maybe early 79. Those are the tracks, The Time Lord and Highway Corsair. And those songs are kind of notable because they have a bit of a different sound compared to what Pagan Altar became famous for. As an example of that, let's go to the tape and check out a little bit of Highway Corsair, one of the early songs Pagan Altar offered up on the Time Lord EP. All right, so yeah, there's an early Pagan Altar with the Highway Corsair. That song, again, rocks out fairly well. Doesn't really have the overbearing doom tendencies that most of the material on Judgment of the Dead has. You can tell the band here is doing maybe a little bit more of, the 70s hard rocking kind of thing. And Alan Jones has said, in interviews that, some of his bigger influences back then were bands, Deep Purple, Thin Lizzy, stuff like that. So I think you can hear, bits of that, especially again in the really solid guitar work. But yeah, most of the band's material strays much doomier than that. And 2004, they would not only release the Time Lord EP, but they also released another full-length album worth of material. So this would be sort of technically their second full-length album, I guess. Again, Judgment of the Dead, do you call it an album? Is it just the demo that's committed to full-length album? It's 7 songs. It's long enough to be an album. I consider it the first album, so I want to consider this next one their second album, though some people may number them differently. 2004 saw the release of Lords of Hypocrisy. This one, once again, featured songs that they had written back in their original run. However, a lot of the material on those tapes, as they exhumed them and checked them out, the older tapes weren't of substantial quality where they could just record it and put it back out. So they ended up basically getting some new members to help out and having to re-record a lot of that material. So the songs were written back in the day, but you had new recordings of those songs offered up. So once again, it gets a little tricky keeping track of, what was, so it was all written at one time, recorded at one time, but those recordings couldn't be used. So then you had to re-record those songs, using, modern technology, and some new bandmates. Lords of Hypocrisy kind of picks up where the Judgment of the Dead material leaves off, following in that, kind of doomy, Sabbathy, occult tradition for sure. But everything feels like it's a little more tightly packaged this time. And let's see, I actually don't have a clip of this one pulled up because it is a little bit more of the same, just maybe better executed. And it works quite well. One thing that folks notice with this, the songs feel like they kind of connect lyrically, that there's a bit of a concept running through the album, dealing with, the Battle of Armageddon, but also the aftermath of that. You literally have songs on here called like Armageddon, followed by the interlude, followed by the aftermath. And there were hints of this with the material on the Judgment of the Dead recordings also. The band have said, in some interviews that yes, they basically had this sort of mapped out where it could have been a concept album from the get-go, but they also thought it might be a bit much to try to roll out a concept album as sort of their first recording. And I think that was probably smart of the band not to go overboard and try to do it whole hog on the first round. So that, yeah, the demo just had, pieces of that idea in some of the songs, but it wasn't meant to all be connected. Lords of the Hypocrisy, though, feels like, yeah, the story is kind of, fleshed out. It works very well here. Folks rave about this album when it came out. It's, still a favorite for a lot of fans. And it really shows you, what they could do in terms of, that, really strong, doomy Sabbath-inspired metal, but with, excellent guitar work. Folks complimented, Cherry's vocals a lot, and, just, the quality of the lyrics as well, that it wasn't just a lot of, sort of, bonehead, downer type stuff, but that, Cherry had put a lot of, work into the lyrics, and it came off, relatively poetic and, well, lyrical, which was really cool. So yeah, Lords of Hypocrisy did it very well. I like the album a lot. It is probably the one in their catalog I play the least. Not for any particular reason. Just you can't play all of them exactly the same, I suppose. But one thing about Lords of Hypocrisy, for me at least, is that it got overshadowed by the band's next outing. In 2006, so 2 years later, we jump forward and they release what I would consider their third album, Mythical and Magical. And this one really floored people when it was released in 2006. This was one of those albums that, a lot of people on different heavy metal message boards were just absolutely in awe over how good this album was. One thing they do here, again, it's older material, some of this going back again into the latest 70s even, but re-recorded with a new lineup, new technology. But this album, a lot of the material leaves some of the doomy element behind and replaces it with a bit more of a slightly folky element. And that may sound at first like a bad idea, or it may sound like, oh, it must be, much, more lightweight or, poppier or something. Not really. Yes, you lose, some of that, really heavy, occult atmosphere that they used a lot of on Judgment of the Dead and still used a lot of on Lords of Hypocrisy, but there's not as much of it here. But what they replace it with is just purely magnificent. We're going to play a couple of clips from this as examples of what they were doing. The first one will be from one of the songs that, has a little bit more of a straightforward vibe to it. This is Cry of the Banshee off of Mythical and Magical. And again, I'll probably skip forward just a little bit once this gets going. All right, I gotta stop it there. I'll play the whole bloody song. And Pagan Altar, at least in the past, were, a little sensitive about a lot of their stuff being put online. So yeah, don't want to let the clips go too long. Amazing song again, fabulous lead work by Alan. He can really just, let those, solos play out and just keep running. And that's something else they do really well on this album. The songs take their time and they have room to breathe because they're not focusing on that really heavy occult atmosphere now. The songs feel a lot more expansive and they get this very quiet, majestic grandeur to them, like you heard there. Just little touches they use here and there too, with the soft background female vocals, that hit just right. Just the very soft but very insistent, drum beat galloping, helping keep that song propelled along with the guitar line. It's just they just nail it on some of these tracks. And again, some of the tracks, they are slower and do develop more atmospherically as well. I have, as an example of that, we're going to play a clip from The Sorcerer, which is one of the most beautiful songs on the album, in my opinion.
Darkness, like a cloak of saffron velvet, surrounds him. Stark trees of stone support the moon and stop that sky from falling in around him. He stands upon his mountain throne, his arms held high, he's all alone. Ashen face turned towards the sky. His eyes reflect a tormented soul, and the shears have took their toll. His mind too troubled to let him die. The sorcerer.
All right, again, if I don't stop it there, I'll sit through the entire track. Just, gorgeous stuff. Takes their time, lots of room to breathe in the song, but it never feels dull, it never drags. Just fantastic stuff. Mythical and Magical is one of those just, high watermark kind of albums that it's hard to ever surpass, even for a band, with this strong a catalog. So yeah, by 2006, this band was absolutely just, bowling over audiences. And they remained active in years after that. They were, performing festivals. There's a couple of singles from around this time. They did a split with Jex Thoth with a really great song on it. I think it's called Walking After Dark. There's another split single. I'm trying to remember who that one is with. I don't remember off the top of my head. My apologies. But yeah, it would be quite a while before you get another full-length album released. The band still had more old material and did work on putting some of it together for what would have been their fourth album. But unfortunately, in 2015, Terry Jones passed away after losing his battle with cancer. And that, of course, put things on the back burner for a bit. What's kind of, maybe even more of a shame about it is apparently the fourth album they had finished up by around maybe late 2012, 2013. But Alan and Terry were not happy with the way it had turned out. And so they kind of shelved it. They realized they're going to have to back way up, re-record a good chunk of it. And as such, Terry did not hear the finished product when it was finally done and released in 2017. The 2017 album then, it still featured, Terry's vocals since they had already been done, but he had already passed away before the release of album number 4, The Room of Shadows. So this album, of course, already, when it comes out, has, it is kind of a very sad aura about it because of the circumstances that had played out. It still had, mostly songs from, the old days. Again, reportedly, I've heard some of the stuff on here, though, was newly penned material. And that would have been a first in the Pagan Altar discography if they were finally writing some new original material here in the 20-teens. This album, for me, is decent. It's not their strongest. Of the rest of their catalog, I would have to say this is the weakest of the 4 albums. And it's a little hard to pin down why. It has some very decent tracks on it that I like, but it's not one I go back to very often at all. I said earlier I play Lords of Hypocrisy the least, but I still think it's an extremely good album. This one I'll go back to from time to time, trying to get into it a little bit more, but never quite manages to fully click. It doesn't quite have, again, that same openness, airiness, and that same folkiness that really makes Mythical and Magical something special. But it also doesn't have the full-on, doom of the occult kind of vibes of the earlier stuff either. Feels maybe a little bit more in between, and maybe that's part of the issue is that it doesn't quite, connect on either of those channels. Um, there were some just very little nitpicky things that it bugged me about the album when it came out too. A lot of the song titles are very similar to song titles that they had in other parts of their catalog. That shouldn't be a huge thing, but like Dance Macabre, they've had other songs, called with dance, as the first word. They have a song here, Rising of the Dead, where they have Judgment of the Dead. And then they also have a song with Rising, is the title. So it felt a little bit, there's at least one more too. Oh, there's a Dance of the Vampires on here. So you had Dance Macabre and Dance of the Vampires back to back. And on the previous album, you had Dance of Druids. I think there may even be another dance song somewhere. So I remember, yeah, when I was getting this and playing it the first few times, it was a little confusing just because it's like these song titles are really familiar, but no, they didn't just re-record the same thing, but it's just like, arg. It was a little frustrating that the song titles seem to be overlapping a lot with other song titles. It's not like the band has, 20 albums and you're going to stumble into some similarities. This was fourth, and it felt like a lot of the titles, at least, ideas were getting recycled a little bit. So nevertheless, it's not an awful album by any account. It's still better than anything a lot of bands might put out. But by the standards of the first three Pagan Altar albums, this one, it definitely feels like it's coming in a bit of a distant fourth. And that has been it for Pagan Altar to date. Yeah, as I said, they are still technically an active band. They do have a new vocalist helping out in the live slots. It's Brendan from Magic Circle fame. By all accounts, he's very good live. I've never seen the band live, of course, but folks have said he's very good. I'm assuming there's YouTube footage, live videos you can watch. I am not a big fan of sitting and watching live concert video footage. I just never have gotten into that a ton. I watch a little here and a little there, of course, but I'm not someone who'll sit and delve through YouTube's archives looking for footage of all these different big festivals and shows and stuff. But I'm sure it's out there for folks who are interested. And again, there have been interviews with Alan Jones, in the past couple of years, and he's hinted that, yeah, they are working on something else. So we haven't necessarily heard the last of Pagan Altar. And I think it would be fantastic to have the band come back, and put out, a really, great album once more. Not that Room of Shadows is, a bad ending to their catalog. It does feel like a slightly sad ending, if nothing else, mainly though because of the circumstances with, Terry's passing before it got released. But I would like to see them, bounce back from that and do something else. Like I said at the beginning of this, I feel like Pagan's Altar's name has started to kind of slip back into obscurity a little bit. Right there, for the first, 10 years or so, from 2000, definitely up to at least, the time of Terry's death around 2015, Pagan Altar had really made a name for themselves as, it's what everybody always kind of hopes and dreams about. This small band from back in the day that never got a chance, disappeared from the earth completely, and then from this really circuitous set of circumstances about finding out there's a bootleg and then self-pressing some CDs to try to, get the money themselves rather than just, having people pay hundreds of dollars for, a crappy bootleg version. All of a sudden, they become, one of the really revered and highly respected bands from their genre. How cool a story is that? And I think it would be great for them to come back, knock it out of the park one more time, just to remind folks who have started maybe to forget about Pagan Altar, or for the youngest group of fans who've actually never had a chance to check this band out, since it's been quite a while since they were really getting a lot of chatter in heavy metal circles. So here's hoping that we'll hear more from the band in the near future. All right, I have talked enough. So now let's talk metal in the comments down below. Your thoughts on Pagan Altar's catalog. I know there are tons of fans out there. Maybe there's some folks who are curious about the band. Maybe folks want to know, where should someone start? Do you start with mythical and magical? It's a fantastic album, but it's not necessarily representative of the rest. Maybe you start with Lords of Hypocrisy, the demo. What would you recommend to someone as their starting point? What are your favorite songs? What other anecdotes do you know? Were any of the random rumors and stuff dispel? Then you can just say, nope, that flat out was rubbish and has been laid to rest long ago. By all means, leave a comment, keep the conversation going. Let other people learn from your knowledge and have a better picture of what Pagan Altar is really all about. All right. With that, I'm going to sign off. Until next time, everybody take care. And as always, keep banging your head.